VBL! Another season is upon us, and with it, another draft analysis. Let's get into it. This season we are the good guys. All of my pure, delicious, beloved Pokemon are superheroes. They're gonna save the day. And you're gonna see how. We're gonna start with a little bit about the drafting style here. I've learned a lot about drafting over the last few months. At the beginning of the generation, I uploaded a video that was talking about terastallizing and how you really want to have a solid type chart. So that if your opponents have a certain typing that they can beat you with, they can terastallize into that type and you have no recourse. And while I wasn't wrong in that and I did quite well that season, I've learned a lot more about drafting and VGC play in general. Here's some teams that have really influenced my thinking. So the first team on the left here is my team from the first season that VBL-S did for Generation 9. And it was a great team. I went undefeated with it for many weeks. And it had all of the fundamentals kind of down. Started with a good value pick in Golden Go, which was not the highest price point in the first regulation. A bunch of other Pokemon that really filled out all of the different niches that I was looking for in a team. It had speed control, fast and slow. It had a balanced type chart. It had all these things, and it did quite well. So I believe that that was what I needed. And then I kept looking at other teams that performed just as well as mine, and I realized they just don't have to be so perfect. Coming from singles, which is where the majority of my draft league experience was when I started playing, you really need the Hawk Dock for your type chart because you need to have switch-ins to everything. It's really easy to get swept. In VGC, it just doesn't work that way. Nothing shows that better than this team here in blue. Applejack's Broad Street Breloom. This team went like 9 wins and 2 losses in a season, and if you look at it, it's crazy. This team has a bunch of holes. It has very little defensive synergy. It has very little in terms of responses to Trick Room. It has Meditite and Grumpig right at the bottom and a couple taunt users. Final Gambit, Staraptor, maybe. Got a bunch of kind of unorthodox pieces. 7-point Blissey is ridiculous, and I don't think it hardly ever came to any games. 7 points for Electrode as well. Nothing about the team screams synergy. Nothing about it screams good typing. The only thing that it does well is bombastic offense. Iron Moth, Iron Valiant, Staraptor, Bisharp, they all do a lot. Frostmoth and Dreadnought, and Venomoth as well. Not the bulkiest Pokemon, but they can certainly set up. This team performed incredibly well, and I realized that I had been focusing too much on making teams that were perfect, that were solved, that had all of the boxes checked. And then I looked at that team, and a team like Colby's right here, the Boca Raton Bellybolts from last season, this team has no Pokemon over 100 speed, and he went undefeated through the regular season. He didn't make it all the way through playoffs, but still, this team performed incredibly well. And the reality is, not only did he not have any Pokemon over 100 speed, his team didn't even have great synergy. He had Palafin and an Intimidator, which is very strong, but all of his offensive threats were physical. Urshifu, Single Strike, Palafin, Landorus. He had a Amoonguss, Rotom, Mesprit as the special attackers, and Articuno, who was a reasonably good, mid-tier value pick, but still, the team on paper just doesn't look that good. But what it has, and what the Broad Street Brelooms have in common, and something the Golden Goats on the left have, and the Golden Goats on the right maybe don't have as much, is just good Pokemon. Offense, Landorus, Amoonguss, Palafin, Urshifu, just like Iron Moth and Iron Valiant, these Pokemon are just plain good, and good Pokemon is all you really need to win. You can see that on the right here. My Golden Goats team, it had a pretty good looking type chart, especially before I made some of the transactions I did. It had a lot of boxes checked. We had Fake Out, we had Redirection, we had physical and special walls, we had physical and special attackers, Fairy and ground coverage and Trick Room really strong. And yes, I did commit to a gimmick for the season of bringing each Pokemon an equal amount of times, but the team just had no big hitters. My strongest Pokemon was really Hawlucha with a Mirror Herb boost from a Swagger from Morgrowth, which is not a strategy you want to rely on. So here's my takeaways. I've focused a lot in VGC on not losing, on building to not lose, and also building to win. But I find myself kind of stuck in a pattern of, oh, well, if they do this, then I'm gonna lose. So I have to have an answer for it. If my opponent has 2 Pokemon that are spamming ground moves and I don't have great ground resists, I'm just gonna lose. So I need to have ground resists. If my opponent has a bunch of electric types or a bunch of electric terras and I don't have a ground type myself, I can't hit them super effectively and I'm going to lose. And I think that's a little bit short-sighted to try to check every box and, oh, if I don't have this, I'm gonna lose. Because the reality is in VGC, you've got Protect, you've got a lot of other tools. It's very hard for one strategy to beat you in just one way. So it's good to have your fundamentals in order, right? A Fire, Water, Grass core, but you need power to back it up. And I think most importantly, you need to have fun strategies that you're excited to use that are going to be successful. Fuck it, we ball is a real thing when you're putting together a draft. If you say, I gotta be smart, I gotta save my points, I gotta make sure I get a fairy type here instead of the really synergistic thing that would be fun. While that might be smart drafting, while that might be a kind of conservative style, I don't think it's conducive to winning. I think taking strong fucking guys is good. And I think that's proven no better than by this fucker. Slushy's team, Rich's team, they were not perfect. Rich's team, especially before the transactions he made, had a lot of flaws, but both of them performed incredibly well because they just had big freaking numbers with great Pokemon on them and great synergy. They didn't have to have every box checked. Slushy only really had 7 Pokemon on the team, right? But they weren't playing to not lose. They were playing to win. And that is what I'm going to try to achieve in my draft. So, here is the gang. Oh, we went too fast. Here's the gang. We got a big team full of hitters and value pieces support Pokemon. Now, did I completely neglect the fundamentals? No, I did not. But there's no ground type on this team. And I've never drafted a team without a ground type before. I think ever, across many seasons and many formats. And I realized, a ground type is nice, but I don't need it. I don't need to prioritize that over different pieces that just fit together so well. It's absurdly obvious, I think. But I think when we start drafting for VGC, we come up with the synergies we want to use, the ideas that make sense, that seem really exciting. And we find ourselves drafting really synergistically, but with a lot of holes. That's the kind of things we focus on in draft analyses, right? Too many holes is a problem. But if you have a couple holes, but in exchange, incredible synergy, that's probably the way to actually win games. We've seen this, I think no coach epitomizes this more than Poppin Fresh. Poppin, if you're watching this video and you're not in VBL, hello, by the way. I expect most people watching this are from VBL. Poppin frequently drafts teams that don't check every box, but you will never catch Poppin drafting a team that doesn't have cool, scary Pokemon. Last season, he drafted 2 Dark types and spent the majority of his points on them. Now, those 2 Pokemon, especially when using their Dark type moves, are going to be walled by fairies. They're going to be walled by other Dark types. But Poppin didn't care. He said, these Pokemon are so freaking good. You bring your answers, that's fine. I can work around it because I have the better Pokemon, and I'm forcing you to do something. So that's what this team is endeavoring to do. Number 1. You saw a little spoiler before. Aizawa. I don't watch My Hero Academia, but I've heard this is a character who removes people's abilities or quirks, which feels very appropriate for Galarian Weezing. Why are we starting with this Pokemon? This Pokemon is not one of my highest point value guys. Well, he's up there. It's because this is the centerpiece of the team. The Synergy Destroyer is going to be coming most weeks with Neutralizing Gas. And Neutralizing Gas, I've had the pleasure of using a few times in VGC. It is nasty good. I wasn't a huge fan of Regigigas drafts last generation, but Weezing and Slacking, I think, in this generation have a lot of potential because you've got a lot more ability to switch, to pivot around, to position yourself better without Dynamax. And With Terra, you have the ability to make Pokemon live longer, such as if my Weezing is being threatened by something, I can always Terra out of its weakness, keep it on the field longer to support my Slacking, and abilities matter more than ever. With Power Creep, Chien-Pao, Chi-Yu, Golden Go, even, these Pokemon have insane abilities, and being able to just turn them off and control the flow of battle my way, I think is going to be really solid. Add to the fact that this Pokemon is just overall quite good. Really bulky, Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, really strong moves, relatively good stabs, you know, Overheat to hit those steel types that otherwise would wall the Fairy and Poison coverage. It's not bad. And of course, if we're going to be using this guy, we got to pair him with Slacking. Baloo is here. This is the other half of the team. This Pokemon is called the Awoken Colossus, because with a little bit of the gas, he is the strongest Pokemon in the form. Highest base stats, 160 base attack, good special attack as well at 95, good HP, good defense, reasonable special defense, and 100 base speed make this an absolute monster to reckon with. Now, of course, he has a terrible ability, and there's a lot of Pokemon who have great abilities that make them stronger than Slacking. But when Slacking's on the field, he's next to Weezing. And next to Weezing, you don't have your abilities either. So then it's just no abilities, final destination, scrapping it out. And with incredible coverage this Pokemon has, he can hit every single Pokemon in the game for super effective, I think. Wait, does he have a grass move? I don't remember. But he certainly has Body Slam, Knockoff, High Horsepower, and Drain Punch, which is, if you notice, a normal type move, and then a move to hit ghosts, a move to hit steels and rocks, and another move to hit steels and rocks. No resists to the normal stab, and really that's all you need off of 160 base attack. So that's our core. The team is built around these two. We have a lot of benefits. Not only do we have the neutralizing gas option, we also have Misty Surge as a possibility. Obviously Slacking is gonna want the neutralizing gas, but if Slacking isn't there, or if I somehow find a way to use Slacking without needing neutralizing gas, Misty Surge is a great thing to have on the team. Weezing is really good into fairy types, with the poison typing, and fighting types, with its fairy moves. It's got Will-O-Wisp, it's got Taunt, we turn off our opponent's abilities, and of course, Weezing is putting out oppressive offense. Of course, we have some minuses with this core, things that need to get patched up. My own abilities are getting turned off, so if Weezing is next to anyone but Slacking, which if Slacking has a bad matchup, if my opponent has a fast Pokemon with Will-O-Wisp, you know, Slacking isn't going to want to be positioned that way. If Weezing is next to something else and I turn off my own ability, well, I'm in just as bad of a spot as my opponent, you know? You have two abilities of turning off, I'm only turning off one, but still, you know, I gotta plan around that, not to have too many Pokemon with too crucial of abilities. I'm also weak to Steel types. Both of these Pokemon can't hit Steel types with their stabs, and they also don't do great into Ghost types. Ghost types resist poison, and they're immune to Slacking's main stab. Of course, Slacking has knockoff for them, so it's not terrible, and he has super effective coverage into Steel types, but still, I want to be able to hit those Pokemon super effectively with stab to get rid of them. The speed is good, don't get me wrong, especially with my Weezing turning off Prankster, but 100 base speed is not the best, and Weezing is base 60, 65, so not the best speed there either. And overall, both these Pokemon are physically bulky and have Will-O-Wisp, but not the best in terms of Spadaf. So that's what we're working with the core. How are we gonna shore this up? Enter Toothless. This is Roaring Moon, the first pick of the team, and truly the one who's probably gonna come to every matchup. This Pokemon, I think, used to be somewhat mediocre in the format, just with not having good stab moves, kind of relying on acrobatics for a high-powered stab. But now he has a knockoff, and he is ready to play. This Pokemon increased in points, of course, but I think he finally is ready to move. Roaring Moon has a very privileged move pool. Tailwind, of course, at 119 base speed is the fastest Tailwind around with a booster energy. But in addition, he has Breaking Swipe and Snarl for damage reduction, Dragon Dance for setup, and very solid coverage. Knockoff and Scale Shot, obviously, for his main stabs, but he's got Acrobatics, which gets super strong with a booster energy boost, and of course, Flying is a great terror for him to resist fighting moves, and Iron Head for fairies. He's also got a bunch of other cool coverage options that I'm sure we'll see during the season. So, this team has room for a top tier. Weezing and Slacking are both in the 13 to 14 point range, but Roaring Moon, we've got the budget. We should get one thing besides Slacking that really demands attention. That's one of the benefits of Slacking. You have to position it right, and when you position it right, it's incredible. But that's true for a lot of other Pokemon. Hawlucha with a swaggered Mirror boost is really good as well. Roaring Moon is something that is threatening without needing anything next to it. From turn 1, he's going. Plus, photosynthesis is not ignored by neutralizing gas. So, these three Pokemon work very well together. Not only are we able to use our ability next to Weezing and not be hampered by our own neutralizing gas, but Roaring Moon is very good into ghost types. The exact Pokemon that Slacking really struggles to hit. Roaring Moon has great speed without booster energy, or insane speed with it, and Tailwind to be able to make the rest of the team, which was somewhat struggling with speed, go faster. Great Spadef to make up for the lower Spadef on the other two Pokemon, and he has setup potential as well, so we've already got a bulk up on Slacking and a Dragon Dance on Roaring Moon to take care of his truly very solid bulk. This Pokemon is weak to Fairy types, which are covered by Weezing. It's weak to Fighting types, just like Slacking, but those are also covered pretty well by Weezing. He's got mediocre defense, but Weezing covers that with Will-O-Wisp. He's weak to burns, but if Weezing decides to run Misty Surge 1 week and Slacking just goes with Truant or stays on the bench or what have you, then Roaring Moon is going to be immune to those burns. And the only thing that really compounds weaknesses here, besides the fighting weakness that I mentioned, which Weezing does help with, is that it makes the team very, very physical. So, what do we have next? Iron Man, Metal Face Doom to all fairies. Scizor is here as, I think, a very solid partner for Roaring Moon. He's got some cool options, of course, Tailwind, more setup, and Swords Dance, Feint, and Quick Guard is good options, but he's really going to be mainly dishing out damage. This is our best priority user on the team. We've got Bullet Punch coming out. This guy got Bug Bite back, so that's a 90 base power Bug Stab with Technician up, which may not always be up. And some good coverage as well in close combat, Dueling Beat, Knockoff, other things like that. This Pokemon is weak to Fire types, weak to Steel types, and has mediocre Spadef, just like Weezing and Slacking. But his mediocre speed and his burn weakness are relatively patched up by his own Tailwind, Roaring Moon's Tailwind, and the potential for Misty Terrain. In exchange for that, we've got Insane Priority, which is really important to the team, another solid defensive Pokemon, another Tailwind user, more setup potential, and critically, a Fairy Killer. That's really what this team is for. Our Poison type, this Pokemon is for, our Poison type is not that offensive, and not that fast. And we need something that can kill the fairies before they can hit Roaring Moon. What's better than the best Bullet Punch user in the game? So you can see, 3 picks, very physical. We've got a real weakness to steals. You know, all these Pokemon can hit steals super effectively with coverage, but none of them can hit them with stab, and steals resist most of the stabs here. However, we're really building around Roaring Moon in the core here to make the synergy strong. You bring your steel type, I can work with that, but you have to answer my Roaring Moon, and you can't use a fairy type because I got a poison and a steel in my top picks. Moving on. Enough of these physical attackers, we've got a special attacker in here. And in fact, it's Melodic, the best competitive Pokemon in the format. Now you're starting to see the team coming together. We've got 3 strong physical attackers, and the team is overly physical. Okay, we need a special attacker, but not only that, we're going to turn off Burn from opposing Will-O-Wisps with Galarian Weezing's Misty Surge, and we're going to turn off Intimidate, because if you intimidate me, oops, you just activated competitive on Melodic, and now Melodic is an absolute force to be reckoned with. This Pokemon is one of my favorites of all time. I've drafted it many times. It lacks in the coverage department, but Terra Blast is going to be a godsend for it. And what it lacks in the coverage department, it makes up for in relatively okay options. Water and Ice hitting most Pokemon besides Water types. And just very simply having an incredible supportive toolset. Helping Hand is great. Recover and Coil and Hypnosis makes this thing impossible to kill. Icy Wind for very reliable speed control, Life Dew, and other options that we may see down the line. Plus, great Spadef. So, no Intimidate. This addresses the fires that Scizor is so weak to. Huge Spadef, as mentioned. Icy Wind user to give further speed control. It's a Water type with Scald, which I think is really important. If I'm not running Misty Terrain, we've got 2 different great options to burn our opponents, and it's a special attacker. So, huge support to Roaring Moon, great support to Scizor and taking out the fire types, good support to Slacking as well. All the pieces are gelling quite well. Of course, this does have its issues. Meh physical defense, just like Roaring Moon, but Scald and Burn from Weezing. Very weak to Grass, but of course, we've got a Poison type and a Roaring Moon with Terraflying Acrobatics and a Scizor who's going to want to be running Bug moves. So if we get anything else down the line, a lot of teams don't even have a good Bug type, but this team does. And so having a good Bug type, a good Poison type, and potentially having a good Flying type and a good Fire type down the line means Grasses are really not going to have a good time, which makes Milo quite covered for. The meh speed also more than made up for by Roaring Moon having the best Tailwind in the game. And why do I say it's the best Tailwind in the game? What about Murkrow, Volbeat, Illumise, Gale Wings users, Tornadus? They all rely on their abilities, which aren't being activated. And so it's just the raw speed stat. Well, Talonflame is faster than Roaring Moon, but Roaring Moon has booster energy. That's right, Roaring Moon, next to Weezing, wins the Tailwind War and is the fastest one in the game. How's that for synergy? If you run a fucking ability shield on your Tornadus, Angie. But a little extra weak. So, we're seeing these pieces fit together. Next up we have Ray. Blazing Trickery. This is Blazing Trickery because, first and foremost, Delphox is a fucking fire type, which is the best answer to steel types. It's the only type that both resists steel and hits it for super effective. But Delphox has a lot of tools up its belt. It's good to have a solid Psychic type, because Psychic types have crazy move pools, and Delphox, especially as a starter Pokemon, does not disappoint. Imprison Trick Room is going to be huge on this Pokemon, being quite fast, a great user of Covert Cloak or Terra Ghost to make sure that I can prevent opponents from getting up Trick Room. Howl with a fast speed is going to be great for something like a Slacking or a Roaring Moon that wants to get an attack boost. Will-O-Wisp, again, now our third Pokemon that's very viably going to be burning our opponents and shoring up Roaring Moon's weaker physical defense. Encore, the scariest and most dangerous move in the game. Light Screen and Reflect, of course, a little bit of damage mitigation in addition to Weezing's Will-O-Wisp and Roaring Moon's Snarl and Breaking Swipe combo, and a little bit of setup as well in Calm Mind or Nasty Plot. But of course, this Pokemon's also dishing out big damage with very respectable special attack, good stabs, and good coverage as well. So, we're adding a very strong special attacker that can destroy the steals that up until this point have been an issue for the team. We've got more speed, we've got an answer to Trick Room, we've got more burns, and we've got a second Pokemon that can really put pressure onto those fighting types that hit Roaring Moon and Slacking super effectively. So a Psychic type to cover that, in addition to, of course, Roaring Moon's potential Terraflying Acrobatics. We've also got that X Factor with that Encore potential, with Trick, with other sorts of tricksy options. The physical frailty here, covered by Will-O-Wisp. The mediocre abilities on Delphox, Blaze and Magician, really not that likely to be activated unless maybe we're going down in the Sash with Blaze. Not that big of a deal when we have Weezing there. Not that strong on the special attacking front. Could be a problem down the line. Would be nice to have something stronger, but hey, you spend your points on 4 strong physical attackers, or 3 and then a Weezing, which can go mixed, and you're going to take the special attackers you can get. Delphox does have a lot of weaknesses, and so the team does have some net weaknesses to stuff. Net neutral to dark, 1 dark weakness and 2 resistances. 2 resistances to Ghost as well, but ground, not looking great unless we run Levitate Weezing or Terraflying Roaring Moon. A bit weak to Rock as well, no resist. So, you know, there's some concerns there, but overall, the amount of priority that fits together is pretty crazy. So, here's the top 6. Our main issue right now is electric types. No way to hit them super effectively, and they hit Terraflying Roaring Moon and Melodic super effectively. Water types, we also have no way to hit super effectively. We have 2 Pokemon that resist them, but 1 Pokemon that's weak to them, and with no electric or grass type, they're going to be a bit of an issue. Flying types, no resists to, and nothing to hit it super effectively. So again, a little bit concerned. We don't have resists to a ground or rock, but we do have Melodic who hits ground type super effectively, and Scizor and Melodic both hit rock type super effectively. Special attack isn't great, with Melodic being base 100 and Delphox being base 115. Definitely could be better, even though they do have good moves. And no slow mode, the slowest Pokemon being Weezing at 65, and only Delphox for Trick Room. But on the right, you see just how many positives this team has going for it, right? Slacking and Roaring Moon are two incredibly strong attackers, especially if Roaring Moon has the booster energy, and they both work really well with Weezing, who is arguably one of the strongest support Pokemon, offering unique support as well, decimating teams. Scizor, Melodic, and Delphox are coming in to support the top 3 and build out a nice top 6. Now, these guys have weaknesses for sure, but they can answer those weaknesses in a lot of different ways, and crucially, it is very hard to deal with the threat of these 6. But we gotta keep building the team. And coming in is Static Shock the Bronzor, the 2-point wonder. This was one of my last picks in the draft, but it's here early because it's the key to a big part of the strategy, which is having a slow mode, having a Trick Room option, having the ability to say, okay, you're not gonna come at my team with just, oh, I'm just gonna run Trick Room and run through these faster Pokemon. Because I've got an extremely slow Trick Room setter who's gonna be coming in very handy with Trick Room, Helping Hand, Screens, Bulldoze, Gravity, Hypnosis. You cannot leave this Pokemon alone because it'll set up Gravity, it'll set up Hypnosis, and it'll put everybody on your team to sleep, allowing my Pokemon to sweep. So, we're adding great value now. We're dipping into Value Town. Enormous bulk. Bronzor is one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game with Eviolite. Super slow. Trick Room. It is a ground immunity. This Pokemon is resistant to ground, it's resistant to rock. Not going to be coming the most often, not going to be having the most offensive pressure, so does it make that much of an impact on the type chart? Not necessarily, but when it matters, it's definitely going to matter. It does have no damage output to speak of, and is very weak to the move Taunt, but it's a 2-point Pokemon, and the idea with Bronzor is always going to be to use it to allow other things to do the damage, and if you're bringing Taunt for Bronzor, that's a really good usage of my 2 points. Up next, Frozone. We're talking about a slow mode. Doesn't get any better than this. This is a slow-ass Pokemon with huge offense. This iceberg is affectionately referred to in this slide as the Titanic Bruiser. It has one of the most incredible stab combinations in the game in Rock and Ice, the 2 best offensive typings in the game, with great ground coverage and high horsepower and Earthquake, and Body Press coming off of an enormous physical defense stat that it can boost with Iron Defense. It also has Recover for longevity and Wide Guard, a very underrated tool in my opinion. So we're adding the ability to specifically deal with those flying types that we mentioned earlier, plus Wide Guard, Iron Press, and a great synergistic piece with Bronzor. Bronzor and Avalugg are going to be extremely slow, and Bronzor could potentially help Avalugg do a little bit more damage by being one of the few Trick Room setters that is slower even than it. Of course, it does add some problems, of course, it has some negatives. It must Terra, it is an extremely bad defensive typing, but it keeps its stab bonus when it Terras. You've got a water type with a 1.5 bonus on its ice and rock moves, and it has fighting and ground and dark and water coverage with Terra Blast. This Pokemon, I think, is pretty underrated as a Terra user, and I use it a lot in singles to very much success. Low Spadef, of course, is harder for it to deal with, but we've got Melodic, we've got Delphox, we've got Roaring Moon Pokemon with high Spadef, and Bronzor can always run Light Screen. Now, it is weak to ground and rock, exacerbating that existing issue. Of course, Melodic is helpful with those Pokemon, but we still have no resistance to speak of, besides Bronzor on that front. So, the team is not all perfect, but while those holes exist, this is, I keep repeating the point of the draft, this Pokemon adds so much to the team. Generally, in past drafts, I would really shy away from an Ice Rock type. It just destroys the type chart. But that's only if you're looking at the type chart. It's only if you're looking at those synergies. When you look at what this brings to the table, to the team, it actually adds so much versatility that goes a long way. Moving on, we have Thor, the Master of Thunder, Ampharos. You can see we're very much thoroughly in Value Town now. We're picking low tier Pokemon. But this Pokemon is really good. I am a huge believer. The main issue with this Pokemon is it's not that good at any one thing. It's not that slow and it's not that fast. It's pretty slow. but it's Draft League, and it's pretty good at a lot of things. This Pokemon has exceptionally solid bulk for a 5-point Pokemon. I think it was 5. And it has 115 special attack, plus, of course, the electric type that we desperately needed to take on water types. You can also see coverage-wise. Thunderbolt, Discharge, Volt Switch, all that stuff. Dazzling Gleam as well, a rare coverage move in Fairy. Power Gem, Ice Punch to hit ground types. There's some options here. And then in terms of support, I mean, Eerie Impulse with electric type Eerie Impulse and the very specially frail Avalugg using ice type moves, attacking on both sides with Bolt Beam. This is a match made in heaven. But not only does it have those, it can go fast. It's got Electro Web and Cotton Spore, which are premium support options. It's got Cotton Guard to boost its own defense, Helping Hand and Reflected Light Screen to offer support. This Pokemon is putting in a lot of work. In addition, we picked up Groot, the Lurantis. He is slaying in style because he's got a Zoot Suit on. This Pokemon, also very slow enough to be a solid Trick Room threat at, I believe, 43 speed. And Lurantis got Superpower back. So we don't have a Fighting type, but we do have Fighting type offense. And this Pokemon, again, very cheap for the price, bringing a lot to the table. Leaf Storm, Superpower, huge moves, doesn't have the highest offensive stats, but has very solid defensive stats. And with Contrary, really going to be able to bust? It's going to be able to bust. It's going to be able to boost up its offenses in a way that is going to make this a real threat under Trick Room. And, as a physical attacker, can't be intimidated. Unless it's next to Weezing. Leaf Storm specifically, and Superpower, are good moves, but they do get resisted by a lot. Superpower, not very effective against certain typings, but Pollen Puff, Knockoff, and Poison Jab cover a lot of the Pokemon that might resist it, such as Ghost types, Psychic types, and Fairy types. So those two together make our value crew. They're both slow, but not that strong. They're both slow, but not that slow. They're both strong, but not that strong. And they're both answers to water while fulfilling similar roles. However, they both offer a lot to the team in terms of filling out the holes that we don't have, bring just a lot of value to the table, and having a lot of versatility that they offer the team. Obviously, like I mentioned, the Bolt Beam Trick Room. We've got now 2 electric resists in addition to Roaring Moon. Still no ground type, but 3 resists to electric and only 1 weakness. Means that electric types aren't really giving us that much trouble. Eerie Impulse on the team is really great. Super effective stab versus waters, obviously. Just great stats for low tiers overall. These Pokemon, they're just going to be able to sit on the field for a long time. They have good offenses, so you can't ignore them, and they have good enough bulk. The only issue they have is their speed, but with Trick Room, with Tailwind, they're going to be able to work. Strong special attackers, of course. Lurantis, after 1 Leaf Storm, is at a nasty plot boost. That's a threat, and for us, has 115 special attack, which is very respectable, especially with Thunderbolt and Terra Blast as potential coverage options. And Lurantis as a ground type, as a grass type, gives us a powder immunity. Last up is the Tick. Venonat's a real Pokemon. For 2 points, that's Rage Powder and Sleep Powder, with Compound Dyes making it almost 100% accuracy. It has Nightshade for damage, it has a whole bunch of stat-reducing moves in Struggle Bug, Acid Spray, Pounce, and Lunge, and Screech. This Pokemon has a lot of value to bring to the table, and the team up until here was lacking disruption, so having this Pokemon able to come out and support something like a Nasty Plot Delphox or a Dragon Dance Roaring Moon can be totally clutch in the right situation. So you can see up here in the corner it adds Redirection, Sleep, and potentially forces Goggles. But the Tick is not getting his own slide because we want to assess the team in the whole. What does our team do well? What does our team not do well? So on the left you see the biggest text, the darkest text is what the team is the best at. Impressive physical offense with Slacking, Roaring Moon, and Scizor. No opponent abilities is such incredible support, and I am so excited to use it. Every matchup, you have opponent whose Pokemon need their abilities to function, and you just completely invalidate them. Plus, amazing speed control with Roaring Moon next to Weezing being the fastest Tailwind in the game, along with Scizor being a Tailwind user, Cotton Spore from Ampharos, Electro Web from Ampharos, and Icy Wind from Melodic, as well as 2 different Trick Room users, one that's a better fast Imprisoner and one that's a very slow mode. We've got solid speed all over with 2 Pokemon over 100 speed in Roaring Moon and Delphox. We've got 100 speed Weezing, and then we've got pretty solid speed tiers throughout, going all the way down to the very low end with Bronzor and Avalugg. Roaring Moon, very weak to fairies, but having a good poison type and a good steel type takes care of those, which allows Roaring Moon to be very well supported. The ghosts that are annoying for slacking are spooked by Roaring Moon's super powerful knockoff. Lots of burn allows Melodic and Roaring Moon's weaker defense sides to be shored up. And you can see there's a lot of other things as well. We got strong physical and special defense. We got answers to fighting types. We've got lots of setup options. We've got a great Pokemon in Delphox to deal with steel types. We've got lots of burn options. Oh, that's there. That is there twice. That is there twice. I have so much burn, it has to be there twice. We've got competitive from Melodic to answer our opponent's stat drops. We've got great taunt users in Weezing, Slacking, and Roaring Moon. Other Pokemon on the team get taunt as well. Last season I had very few good users of taunt. That's something that I didn't think was possible, to just accidentally end up with no good taunt user. This team is going to be running taunt very frequently, which is such a useful move for Draft League specifically. We've got good value out of only 2 NFEs, both having very clear and specific roles that they excel at. Priority with Scizor. We've got great answers to the fire types that annoy Scizor, and the Delphox that resists it, and the Melodic, who completely blanks any fire type in the game besides Rotom Heat, and Scovelin, and Ogerpon Hearthflame, which we can handle. Imprison Trick Room to deal with the Trick Room matchup, and the X Factor from Delphox, and a lot of other Pokemon having deep move pools and diversity. We've got a strong slow mode, of course, as mentioned. We've got great answers to flying types that might have been an issue with Avalugg and Ampharos. We've got Wide Guard, which not every team has and is very beneficial. We've got multiple defensive win cons with the Melodic and the Avalugg setting up and being very hard to kill. We've got answers to water types that might have been an issue for Melodic's offenses with the Ampharos and the Lurantis. We've got redirection and sleep powder in the Venonat, and if we don't want to run the neutralizing gas, Misty Surge is great on Weezing as well. Of course, there's some weaknesses, but I thought about this for a while, and these are the only real main weaknesses that I can see. We're weak to ground types, and we're weak to rock types. We have super effective stab into both of them, but we lack resist to those types. So if our opponent has strong Pokemon like that, we'll have to tear out of it. But we're not that weak to any other type in terms of resists, in terms of the type chart. And we do have Bronzor at the end of the day, so the team may be weak in that one regard, but I think really makes up for it in a lot of the other regards. No huge special attacker, but, you know, Delphox with 114 and Ampharos with 115 get the job done, and if our opponents really want to bring their Reflect and their Burn and their Intimidate, we have a lot of answers to those things. Steel types swallow a lot of our team. Absolutely true. We only really have Delphox to break them down. That's a problem, but a lot of our Pokemon have coverage. We can work around that problem. And we're going to be expecting our opponents to bring their steals. When I say us, obviously I'm referring to you, the viewer, and me, and no one else. Just to be very clear, our opponents, aka the opponents of the channel, and no one else's opponents, to be very clear. Steel types, not the best matchup for us, but I know they're going to be coming, and I can prepare for them as such. Can't hit electric super effectively without a ground type, but a lot of these Pokemon have ground coverage, whether it be Slacking, whether it be Hisuian Avalugg, whether it be Terrablast. And the answers to water types are slow and similar in the Ampharos and the Lurantis. But we can probably handle them for the most part if we are positioning those Pokemon well, if we're able to get speed control with them. And of course, Disruption, really we don't have a lot of it. No Fake Out, our Redirector is our worst Pokemon. Again, these are issues that are exploitable, but every team has exploitable issues. If you try to make a team that's perfect, that has no bad matchups, you're going to end up with no good matchups. But this team is going to be able to run over a lot of opponents. Of that, I am certain. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy watching these heroes save the day until week 1.